countdown.
And the pressure.
I know.
I feel like we need awkward hold music for the background. Some lift music.
Welcome to Work is Weird Now. Today we're asking a big year-framing question. How will work be weird in 2026? This is our first episode of the year. So those who are here with us live, thank you for joining us. It's our first ever LinkedIn Live.
It is our first rodeo, quite literally.
Yeah. So we've already hit a few technical gremlins, so there will no doubt be more as we move through this episode. Really pleased to be joined today by award-winning journalist and future of work commentator, Oliver Pickup. Hi, Ollie. Great to have you with us here today.
Great to be here. Thank you very much. And Happy New Year. I don't know if we're allowed to still say it. Happy New Year. There was a Dutch friend of mine who said there is a real faux pas in the Netherlands if you say Happy New Year after the 12th of January. But hey, we're British.
Oh, wow.
We're polite. We're far too polite. But yeah, fantastic to be here.
Thank you.
So to get under our core question around the big trends affecting work in 2026, we're going to explore 7 big shifts with Ollie, which he's outlined for us. And those are ranging from AI readiness to graduate jobs to loneliness to side hustles. So we'll be talking about a lot of those things today. We'll be talking for about, I think, sort of 20 or 30 minutes, and then open it up to questions from those of you who are with us. But do feel free to pop questions into the comments at any point, and we'll get to them once we've finished having our sort of initial chat. So Ollie, you ready to go?
Yeah, ready to go. Let's go for it.
Great. Okay. Cool. So I want to zoom out first of all and talk about why is 2026 significant? So when you look at what's coming up for us in the year coming, what do you think is going to be significant or really change or kind of pivotal moment as we head into 2026?
Well, it does feel as though it's really timely, this episode. We had last week in Las Vegas, CES 2026, the biggest, commercial tech bonanza, and it's really a scene setter for the year ahead. What's going to come up? And there was lots around physical AI. So this is the next step of AI. Lots of robotics as well, and all quite sort of scary stuff. And the very much message was, we're trying to do things that humans can do already, and we don't kind of need humans. Humans are the bottleneck. And actually next week, we've got in Davos, the great, the good, and the not so good, but very rich will descend on the Swiss Alps for the World Economic Forum's annual general meeting, which again is another agenda-setting event. And the theme there is a spirit of dialogue. So we've got this, on the one hand, automate everything. On the other, let's talk about it. And I think that tension means that work is going to be really weird this year. But there is, I think, the sense of a backlash against AI, against technology. I don't know if you caught any of Rutger Bregman, his Wreath lectures at the back end of last year. They were fantastic. And this is a guy, I don't know if anyone in the audience has heard of him, but he's a quite well-known Dutch historian and a kind of provocateur, a troublemaker, if you like. He's not afraid to stand up to the powers that be. In fact, 7 years ago now at Davos, his one and only time at the World Economic Forum, he called out the fact that no one was talking about tax. He said it was a bit like going to, firefighters convention and no one's talking about fire. This is the big problem. So he has a new book called Moral Ambition out, and I will really strongly recommend you listen to those Wreath lectures, because he actually went to Stanford University, which of course is around the corner from Silicon Valley, where all these tech giants are, and said, you must be careful because the dragon is stirring. And actually, the public are kind of against technology. This time last year, there was a fantastic long read essay in The Atlantic by a guy called Derek Thompson called the antisocial century. And his main argument was the better technology is, the more we want to spend time alone, isolated, and without others. And I think this year we're starting to feel as though we need that connection. We don't want to automate everything away, especially in the creative industries. We need that sense of purpose. We need that messiness. We need that complexity. I guess that's my hope anyway, that there is this realization that AI in particular isn't going to do everything. It can't do everything at the moment. And, connection, tough human work is what we want and what we need as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were just discussing it before we joined the call, actually, weren't we? About how it feels different starting this year. It's almost as if last year was very much this moment where everyone thought, oh, let's get AI involved because it can help us solve some of our efficiency and productivity challenges. And actually, the promise potentially hasn't quite materialized like people thought it would, right? So I think the stat that you shared with me was that we're 3 years into ChatGPT and still only 28% AI ready outside of the tech sector. So what do you think happens in 2026 to organizations that just either haven't caught up, or is that the wrong term altogether? Are they actually just finding that AI is going to play a different role in their business? How do you see that playing out over this coming year?
Well, I think it's really interesting, isn't it? I've made 2 pivots in my career. My son, my eldest, was born 12 years ago this year, and I was a sports journalist. And I moved. My weekends became quite sacrosanct with a young child, so I moved away from sports and reporting on sports to technology and business because I wanted to know what life would be like for him and his future. And I now use that to really channel my thoughts. But then ChatGPT 3 and a bit years ago came along and changed everything. I had FOBO, fear of becoming obsolete. And so I invested, time, money and effort in going out of my comfort zone, becoming more of a speaker, becoming more of a thought leader, being more well known. I have a newsletter called Go Flux Yourself, because we are in a state of flux, and it's helping people navigate what we're going through. And I realized that I started the newsletter January 2024, so 2 years ago. And I realized that over the course of 2 years, it become quite sort of doom-mongering and worried. I structure it as the future, the present, and the past. What we can learn from the past, what's happening now, and what it might look like in the future. So actually, before Christmas, I introduced for the first time, realizing it was a bit sort of doom-mongery, a tech for good section, which really illustrates how companies and people are really focusing on what's important, the purpose, whether it's regenerative companies. But I think, at this particular moment in time, we're seeing the data shows businesses don't really know what to do with AI. They know they want to do something with it, but they don't know what. They're not investing in their people. I spoke to a guy called Kiran Fatouche, who runs Work Era over in the US. He's the CEO and founder there, and they actually assess AI readiness in businesses. And he said in the US, apart from the tech sector, where it's 90% AI readiness, unsurprising, away from that, companies have only 28% AI readiness. At the same time, people are trying to work out themselves how to best use AI. So there's this real sort of disconnect. There was that MIT study that came out last summer, the end of last summer, that found, I think it was 95% of the companies assessed, most of them, it was a small sample size, it was about 300, and most of them in the financial services. They hadn't generated any return on investment. You could argue that, return on investment isn't important at this stage. But I think that was taken way out of context, and people grabbed onto that, and that actually triggered this sort of backlash. And I think hopefully the World Economic Forum theme of the spirit of dialogue will help people just pause and think and reset and strategize before pouring out work slop it was really interesting, wasn't it? That work slot was the word of the year for an Australian publication. I can't remember what it was. And I think Oxford's word of the year was not brain rot. That was a couple of years before. But I can't remember what it was now. But the point is, I remember at the end of 2024, someone saying next year we'll have 90% of all online content created by synthetic generative AI, and I was a bit skeptical, but that's come to pass. So now, we are seeing a return, a greater value in genuine human authenticity, in connection. And we're starting to see that in the political sphere as well. Yes, there is this backdrop of crazy geopolitical madness going on. We've got wars in Gaza, in Ukraine, Iran, Greenland, Venezuela. It's quite mad, but actually that's a sort of distraction for what we should be focusing on, which is controlling what we ourselves can do. And I think we are seeing a return back to basics, having those sort of dialogues. And I think the sooner that businesses can really take a pause, really refocus on their people, really invest in their people, then we'll be in a much better position.
Yeah, people and culture, and supporting them on their AI adoption rather than eradicating them with AI and removing the roles altogether. And I think that's the piece for me that feels different this year. Let's not just replace all of the humans and churn, because it's just so obvious when all of this AI content is churned out. But actually, how do we upskill and build it into people's roles, etc., to help people become productive and efficient, but not like to the point of burnout for the sake of it. That's some of my take on it.
Well, I think that's right, Dan. And I spoke to a brilliant lady yesterday, Rebecca Hines. She's Stanford graduate, PhD. She's at a company called Glean, and she runs an AI for workforce company there. And she's actually got a book out. Let me just better plug this. Your Best Meeting Ever. So her niche is meetings, but it's also about. She talks about productivity theatre and how actually people are getting this wrong with AI. The amount of meetings that we have with AI bots coming in, it gives the wrong impression. People, teammates suspect that their boss doesn't really want to be involved if they send their bot, so there's this lack of trust that we're starting to see. But I'd highly recommend that book if you do want to be more productive and have fewer meetings. I'm in a good position in that I'm my own boss. I've got two businesses. I've got Pickup Media Limited, which is through which I channel my writing and speaking, and then I've got a thought leadership business, Pickup and Web, which is about strategy, a thought leadership, and marketing. And I don't have many meetings, thankfully, but I know for many people there is this productivity theatre, and we do seem to need again to reset, rethink how our days look, how working days look, because at the moment we're just sort of windmilling through in many cases.
Yeah. So one of our attendees here has just reminded us that the Oxford word of the year is rage bait. So,
rage bait, exactly.
Which is a good transition into our next topic. So thank you, Matt, for that. I am personally rage baited by a lot of the discussion around graduates because as you do, Ollie, I know you have a child who's about to go into secondary school. I have two who are currently in secondary school, and I get very rage baited by careers fairs that act as if the typical paths are still available to our children. So I want to talk to you about the graduate pipeline collapse, because that's obviously going to be a continuing trend over 2026. Entry-level jobs requiring degrees are now down 67% since 2022. Universities are charging over $50,000 for pathways that increasingly don't exist. So what is going to replace the graduate pipeline this year, do you think?
I have an 11-year-old, and we're currently doing tests for him. And, the flight path that I thought was there to university is looking a bit misty at the moment. I don't know if there is that ROI available. As you say, I think it's £53,000 on average. Someone leaving university will be saddled with that debt. And as mentioned, 2/3 of all graduate jobs have gone down since 2022, the launch of ChatGPT. I think business leaders have gone all in, if you like, on AI. They haven't really, and they've been really myopic. They haven't really thought about the talent pipeline. These are the leaders of the tomorrow that we're sort of cutting off. We're not giving them the opportunity to learn either in the office or anywhere else. And it seems, really, really short-sighted. We have to remember that the likelihood is more of us are going to live till we're 100. There's 5 generations in the workforce now. We are going to have to cater for everyone. And I think it's really interesting that I was really pleased to see and got a piece in the New Statesman at the end of last year that Australia have been the first country to ban social media for under 16s. And I know this last week, Kemi Badenoch saw that there is a great political opportunity here to jump on this and ban smartphones from schools. There was some other research that came out this week from Teneo that found Generation Alpha, so that's kids who are age 15 and under. They're the first proper digital native generation. They are actually trusting friends and family's advice more than technology, more than TikTok, more than other sources that you might think youngsters get their information from. So I was really heartened to see that. But again, that plays into the idea that we are starting to see signs of this backlash against tech. I talk about the need for the 6 C's, as I call them. These are sort of skills that once were perceived as soft skills. So these are collaboration, communication, compassion, courage, critical thinking, and creativity. And I'm really trying to encourage my kids. And you could probably add a few more C's to that as well. It's quite handy that they're all C's. But there was this great quote from a lady called Minouche Shafik, who was president of Colombia and is now head of at the V&A here. She's actually helping the government. But she said, in the past, jobs were about muscles. Now they're about brains. And in the future, they'll be about the heart. So I think, and I love that. And I think those perceived soft skills are really where humans can come to the fore. I think this is going back to CES and the robotics and the physical AI. I think this is kind of where people are going wrong. They are falling into what's known as the Turing trap. They are actually trying to imitate what humans do, whereas we should focus on what humans can't do and actually use AI and other technologies to really enhance our human skills. Yes, take out the drudgery, but Rebecca Hines, who I mentioned before, she talked to me yesterday about how from her data, it shows, from her research, it shows that especially creatives, they want that messiness. They want that, the kind of the tussling with new ideas, fresh ideas. And actually you're starting to see a lack of ownership. One of her colleagues, I think another professor, he's at Stanford, I think, but he was saying how in his classes, he's noticed how there's been a shift from someone coming into his innovation classes saying, this is my idea, to this is an idea, because they've got it from social media. So there is a lack of accountability and a lack of kind of passion there. And I think we've got to be really careful not to lose that.
And just that exploratory side of it, like it's about picking things up and putting them down and soundboarding and trialing and breaking things, getting things wrong to learn from it. That's the whole point. And it's so interesting you say that, because I think Alice and I did a bit of research last year, and I think season 3 and some of 4, we looked at some of those C's, because I think it was around like some Scandinavian research that they lean on in schools and education systems there. It's about leaning into those elements that are, softer skills, but how are they actually really powerful in the world of work now? Because for me, it's an absolute no-brainer.
It is frightening, though. I did see, you may have seen as well, but there was a video that went viral from China. It was a 6-year-old, I think it was about October time. There was a 6-year-old who'd broken her AI tutor, this sort of robot, and she was actually mourning its death. And this robot was able to say to her, you'll always be, I'll always be in your heart. If you look up to the stars, you'll see me and I'll be looking down on you. And it was a really, heart-wrenchingly emotional video. And actually it was great because engineers came out and fixed the robot. But there is this worry that I have that we will become so dependent on AI, on robotics. And, that there's been a massive surge in AI companions, particularly for young men. You have an AI companion that is very agreeable, that doesn't sort of shout back, that doesn't sort of question what you're doing. And I wonder, I really worry about what that is going to do to our youngsters in particular, and older people. There are great, fascinating stories in. I read one in the New York Times, I think, recently about a married lady who has, as her sort of bit on the side, an AI companion, and her husband knows about it, but she is more connected to this AI companion. And what does that do for the fabric of society?
There was one that went around on Instagram the other day about somebody marrying an AI companion, and I was like, oh, wow. But I suppose that links into the next topic, which is around the loneliness crisis and going mainstream. I've read a few studies on this, but one of the stats was 40% of workers have no friends at work, and that, on a personal level, it breaks my heart. Like, I've met lifelong friends through work, met my bloody husband through work.
Yeah, me too.
And I just, that bit really, really, like, breaks my heart,
Your bloody husband. I love that. I'm sure you like that.
Both of us met our husbands through work. I mean, when does loneliness stop being this well-being issue and actually start impacting kind of performance and retention for organizations? And what should they be looking at to address this? Do they have some obligation to address this loneliness aspect from within?
Well, again, it goes back to the essay that I mentioned before, which I strongly recommend everyone read, the Antisocial Sanctuary by Derek Thompson. It's a year old now, but it's so relevant. There was some data that he put out more recently that found that something like 70% of US youngsters aged between 16 and 22, I think, are not going out compared to 20 years ago. They're just not partying. They don't have that. And it makes me feel very old, I suppose. And going back to your earlier questions around university and maybe is it worth it? The experience has changed. What can businesses do about it? They can really try and change their workplaces so they are more accessible, that they take into account the different generations, that they take into account neurodiversity and the need for quiet spaces, louder spaces, open spaces, closed spaces. They can also encourage groups, at work. People need to find their tribe. I think this is it. I think that's the sort of key to humanity. It's all about finding your tribes. I have my tribes. I have a running group. I'm playing football tonight. Obviously I have my family, my bloody wife, but without that, what is there? You have this sort of confected, this sort of synthetic lifestyle, which we're seeing more and more often. I mean, it's telling that, you hear these horror stories about when a ChatGPT server goes down, or another LLM server goes down, and someone's AI companion suddenly goes pop. People are actually killing themselves because of this, and you just think, oh my goodness me. Which is why maybe you guys are the same, but with my kids, I'm encouraging them to do sport, to get out. Thankfully, there's no, heavy lobbied need for a smartphone yet from my boy who's 11, as I say, but it probably will come. yeah, it's about creating those, being intentional and leading. Actually, leaders need to lead here. They need to show that they are part of groups. They want to connect. They want to learn as well. There's a lot of talk about learning velocity, and that goes back to your question around AI readiness. People aren't being given the tools to learn. It's a bit like the MIT survey showed that lots of things are failing, but partly it's because we aren't giving people the tools. It's a bit like giving people the keys, if there are keys, to an F1 car, and then wondering why it's steering off track and crashing at the first corner. We need to really invest in our people and in those sort of human experiences, off-sites, group trips, intentional collaboration sessions, not asking people to go into the office just to sit on Zoom calls. You were going to say, Dan?
I was just going to raise this about the office, because there's still so much in the media about, mandates, return to office mandates. They're there, but there is a need for the office. Like, I am a full office advocate, but it's that flexibility around it. So, prime example, Revolut, they've just invested in this beautiful London office, but there's no mandate. It's like, come and go as you please. It's got all the facilities that you need, but there's no to be here 3 or 4 days a week. But there's still so much in the media at the moment about, back to full day working weeks, and there's still so much tension around it. But there is this then loneliness crisis, and I think some of that can be linked there. But how do businesses do that? It's a big challenge. I think you touched on some of them.
I think that Revolut example is a great one. There was another one a couple of years ago. Atlassian, the big tech firm, they have their HQ in Australia, and they built, I think it's the tallest timber building in the world, and it's a beautiful office. But again, there's no mandate, so they're just saying, look guys, we've got this amazing office, use it as you want. We've listened to you, we've learned from what you want, in the hope that they will come in. And I think the data shows that people are more engaged. They do want to go to work more, and obviously if you're in the office and there's intentional activities and socializing's encouraged, and you're not just sort of chained to your desk the whole time, then that helps stave off that loneliness. And loneliness is the equivalent of having 25 cigarettes a day. It's that bad for your health, so they say.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so this is why it's so critically important. But again, leaders have such an important role to play here. They need to set the tone. It's not about just giving everyone sort of autonomy. It's like saying, no, come on, I want to be involved. I want to collaborate. I want to connect. So let's do that.
I think there's a danger too in how organizations are currently measuring engagement, right? And they're typically using things like their retention figures, right? So they say, well, our people are sticking around, so therefore they must be content. And that tends to be a kind of metric that then shuts down other conversations around engagement. You talk about something called resenteeism, which is obviously an evolution from presenteeism, which we heard quite a lot in recent years. Can you describe what you mean by that and what kind of threat that poses for organizations and for individuals?
Yeah, well, I think just to build on that last point, Gallup's latest state of the workforce research from last year found that only 21% of global employees are engaged. So that means 79% of people are not engaged. And by the way, that's quite high. 21% apparently is quite high. It reached that level at the start of the pandemic. I think it went up to 23, but it's gone back down to 21. And Gallup also found that part of the problem is only 47% of global employees know what's expected of them at work. And so that's quite an important point. But yeah, you're starting to see, during the pandemic, we heard things like the great resignation, quiet quitting, loud quitting, which, I mean, again, for a millennial like me, I found fascinating that you get these people on TikTok showing that they were about to quit. I mean, what that does for their future job prospects, I don't know. But I think resenteeism is people sort of dialing it in at work. They're getting through the day. They're ticking the days off. They're not fully engaged, partly because, again, they don't know what's expected of them. We are starting to see in the research a lot of, particularly millennials actually, and Gen Zs, with having side hustles, whether it's a side hustle that becomes a full-blown job, as we've seen with a few portfolio careers, which perhaps we'll touch on shortly. We're starting to see that a bit more. But I think I think there's given recent economic uncertainty, let's say, and as I said before, the geopolitical situation, people are talking about an AI bubble as well. People are just grateful that they have some sort of job security. So that's part of it. But we're starting to see lots of people coasting at work. So some data I saw found that 47% of Gen Z are coasting at work. And this isn't necessarily laziness. It's just a symptom, a broken psychological contract, I think.
Maybe that's an opportunity for those people who are feeling that resenteeism or are quite disengaged from what they're doing day to day. And maybe if that is a product of them not having a sense of what they're supposed to be doing and what the direction of their business is, which in many cases is really just a result of the world being ever changing, right? Yeah. So I think in many cases it's difficult to communicate to an individual what their job role is because that role is changing so much. So actually that learning velocity becomes even more important then, right? Because the pace at which you take some of that learning on can actually help to ignite a little bit more of excitement potentially around your own role, but also position you better as things change and allows you to be maybe a bigger driver of what happens next in your role. Does that resonate?
Yeah, absolutely. I find myself, I'm a tech and business storyteller, and it's important for me to try and stay on top of these things. But I saw a friend just before Christmas, and she showed me all the things you can do with Claude now, for example. And I was just sort of blown away. So it made me, one of my resolutions or missions this year is to set aside half a day a week to learn. But I think this is where businesses are going wrong. They're just trying to churn as much as possible. You've got lots of your workers coasting. And there isn't really, there's a sort of sense that we must do this, we must use AI. And actually, we need that learning velocity. And again, it comes from the leaders. The leaders need to say, okay, I need to learn about this. I'm setting aside this amount in my weekly diary to learn, and I'm mandating everyone to do the same. And while some people might be listening and thinking, well, no, we definitely can't do that. You just need to work out, ultimately what your purpose is. It goes back to what Rebecca Hines was saying about creatives wanting that messiness, wanting that purpose. When you kind of remove that, you do get that sort of resenteeism, and there was a great Stephen Bartlett quote. Again, he was using F1 cars, but he said, what are we aiming for here with all this automation? Will we watch, for example, Formula One drivers that have robots in the car? No, we won't. We want that sort of human messiness, but we need to keep abreast of what's possible with technology. And by the way, learning velocity isn't necessarily about technology. You could learn about, philosophy but I think we're starting to see some other, that sort of sense of purpose being absolutely critical to people's lives. As lots of their tasks in their job get stripped away by AI or automation, what are they left with? And I really find it interesting when thinking about, for example, the 4-day week or the 3-day week. What will people do with that spare time? And at the moment, the data says, okay, you might go and walk the dog for an extra long walk, but a lot of us will go back to tech, we'll watch more TV, we'll be more sedentary. And again, I think that's not necessarily healthy.
No, and we're going to ask the audience that question at the end. Have a little think about what would you do if you had that 4-day working week. What would you do that extra day? And we're gonna ask you to share if you don't mind at the end. There's a few things I just wanted to touch on there. So, the episode with Yaroslav that we did, season 4 potentially. Something I took away from that conversation was 15 minutes a day. That's all you need to do is to just try something different with AI, a tool you've probably already got sitting there that you subscribe to and let go stagnant or whatever, but just try and do something that you do in your normal day with it, and have that 15 minutes of like playtime almost, like see if you can learn something new, and that it's a short window, to see how it could improve, or if it doesn't work, actually prefer to do it this way. But you've shifted the needle almost. And that was just something I wanted to share. And it's a good episode to listen to in terms of that, looking at AI in a different light rather than doom and gloom, because I appreciate some of the things that we can, and coming into this conversation, I was just thinking, oh God, I hope it doesn't come across too negative, because you speak to some people like this and like, oh, but it's all just really, really like negative. And so we're trying to really feel the positives on it and look at it in that light. And the other part was just around that.
This is why I've started in my newsletter, Go Flux Yourself, to have this section on tech for good. And the first entry was this brilliant company called Be My Eyes, and it's for people with who are blind or are partially sighted, and they connect with volunteers all around the world, and you can literally be their eyes. And it's things like that give you that purpose, that connect people that are brilliant. But to your point, I listened to Dr. Rajan Chatterjee. You may be familiar with him. He's on TV quite a lot, but he talks about happiness. And so 15 minutes a day, as you said, it's these sort of this compound win. He talks about happiness being a 3-legged stool, with the 3 legs being alignment, contentment, and control. And alignment is how you see yourself versus your reality. Contentment is about finding calm, being at peace with your life. And control is again having your sense of agency over your life, understanding that you can't control external events, but it's good sort of daily routines, good habits, good diets, good learning. We can all do those 15 minutes a day.
Yeah. Start less, start with 5, start with 10. And there was one other moment around the resentment element, and there was one of the stats that you shared in the prep call was around like 93% of people are frustrated, but only 4% are quitting. And we've just recorded an episode about memes being the language of work, and we've all seen them like flying around. And it's like people are communicating via memes about how they're feeling with co-workers, with management, like, lots of people that they're sharing a moment that they may even not potentially say out loud, but they're sharing and holding that space via a meme and via that level of communication. And it's mind blowing. It's like, what did we do before them? What does the future of that look like? We've got a whole episode coming on that, but I'm wondering if that is feeding into that resenteeism element.
Well, I was going to say, I find memes. I came off Twitter or X 3 years ago, so that makes me very, very fashionable, I suppose. I know lots of people are leaving in their droves after what Grok churned out last week, or enabled people to do last week. So I don't feel as though I'm not a particularly go-to person for memes. Maybe some of your listeners and viewers here will be better than me, but this is how people do communicate in teams, on Slack especially. I know that it's rife for memes. So I feel a little bit out of the loop, if I'm honest, on that one.
I think it demonstrates, though, I think that there is this desire for connection. Like, even though all the statistics we're seeing are telling us that people are becoming more disengaged, more lonely, less likely to make those connections at work, there is a real desire to connect. And I think what would be really useful, I think, is if we round out the episode today. We've got some questions here that we can address as well. But I think what I'm hearing from what you're saying to us is that there's a real opportunity right now for people heading into 2026 to lean into some of those human skills. So things like human connection, all the C's that you discussed, which you were very good at recalling, which I would have no chance of doing. But to lean into those, to make sure that those human skills are as good as possible, right? So really develop those. to maybe find your purpose, to spend some time figuring out what is it that actually drives you. And then I think what's even more exciting is all the stuff around AI, and for all of its problems and challenges that it poses to the workforce and the workplace, there is no greater time in history to use AI to develop something, right? To build something, to follow your purpose, to create a side hustle, to develop a portfolio career, to find some time in your day, which is what AI is supposed to do for us. And if the 4-day week ever does actually genuinely take off, maybe we have some hope of that. But I think, just figuring out what it is that you want to pursue and then using AI to actually help you get there faster. So there's this real through line for me, which, because I'm an optimist, sounds quite positive. How does that land with you?
I think that's absolutely right. But I think I'd like to go back to the theme in Davos next week, a spirit of dialogue. We're not talking about accelerate innovation or scale faster anymore. We're talking about dialogue, conversation, and talking actually about memes. I was just thinking about recent memes. There's lots of people who go into a shop and they ask, ChatGPT how to communicate with the shopkeeper, and the shopkeeper's also doing the same. And, so we do need to put the phones down, put the screens down, have a human to human conversation. But actually that will help generate better ideas that then AI can finesse. But yeah, I think that's absolutely
and better memes.
Yeah, there you go.
So we've got a couple of questions that have come through here. So just returning to the topic of universities, we've had Scott ask a question about, universities are clearly doing quite a lot to embrace AI and data and to bring that more into the learning, but are they actually genuinely preparing students for the future of work? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Scott. Thanks for that. I think it's really tricky for universities and for schools. And I know when ChatGPT first came out, there was a sort of real panic. What should we do? Should we ban it? Should we not ban it? Should we encourage kids to use it and understand how to use it? And I think that's where most people have landed. I did hear a story about a history professor at university setting an essay, but actually in the metadata using a fake professor and a fake book that once put through an AI LLM would actually show that this professor would be quoted in it. And so that really caught the students out.
Right.
I think, which I thought was really smart. But I think this is it. I think we should really you need to learn. You need to understand how to use AI, but you also need to focus on those 6 C's that I mentioned, particularly around critical thinking, particularly also around truth literacy. We are in the world of deep fakes. We need to be able to properly look at the sources of something. As a journalist, I was always told, you need at least 2 sources before anything is verifiable, and that's a good habit to have. But yeah, I feel really. Do I feel sympathy for universities, given that this pipeline, this guarantee that you will get jobs just isn't there? I think they're in a really difficult spot. Having said that, my 11-year-old, he's due to go to secondary school. Will he go to university? As you said before, Alice, we're hearing at school careers fairs, 50-something-year-olds talking to our kids about jobs that perhaps won't even exist in 5-10 years' time. So, it's really difficult for universities and higher education organizations to really keep pace with that. At the same time, I wrote this piece in the New Statesman around smartphone banning and argued that maybe Labour could consider this and consider social media bans. I got a call from someone who runs, it's called EdTech, Neil Trevani, and he's an amazing maths teacher, and he does all of his maths teaching on TikTok, and he opens it up for free, and it provides disadvantaged kids with fantastic teaching and learning. So a long-winded answer to the question is, I think all education organizations are really sussing out how best to use this technology. And I'm not sure anyone's completely nailed it, because I'm not sure whether the students really know how best to use it, or have been told how best to use it. And I don't know whether that comes from, the bottom up or top down. It's going to be a fascinating space. But what I do hope to see is a sort of pushback against excessive use of social media, smartphones, and AI.
We do have a whole episode where we interviewed the deputy head of a secondary school, and we've got we're going to interview the head of a primary school actually about how our school's preparing children for work, and how that is changing. And we've had somebody on who, right back in the first season, her current role, her career didn't exist when she was studying, and that wasn't really that long ago. So there's hope like that for me. That's really hopeful, but there's still a lot of unknowns there. But yeah, I think all layers of the education system, it's challenging, right?
Well, I think it's about encouraging that curiosity. That's another big C that I mentioned. But being able to be agile, being able to not necessarily commit to one career or one subject, but being able to sort of flow to another one, or being open-minded about where the direction of travel might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the other element, right? Is there's two things that potentially schools can be talking about. One is AI in terms of how you can implement that in your future work and what the impact AI will have on your job prospects. But also there is which we've touched on a bit, the kind of fractional work component. And a lot of the people that we speak to who are operating at the forefront of work right now are saying things like, I'm starting a business right now with my daughter, who's 11, because I want her to be able to graduate into something when she leaves school. So we've actually got something that A, she gains those entrepreneurial skills, B, she has something that is a job that will serve her either right when she comes out of school or whenever she needs it moving forward. So what responsibility do you think schools have towards helping children to understand that work may not necessarily be a full-time linear thing?
Well, that's another good question. And I'm not sure many schools want to admit that, really. Otherwise, the promise of work hard at school, and you will get a job. That social contract seems to have been written up to an extent. But I love the idea of having a company with, my kids. I know when I interviewed a mum recently, she was saying her son for his A-level revision had used AI to create quizzes for him, to create podcasts to help revise. And I think we're going to get this weird point where, and this is where I think people are falling short, businesses are falling short when they're cutting off that grad or young person's talent pipeline, because in many areas, these kids who are coming out of school or university will be more experienced with tech than the people who are their bosses, or even the big bosses. Teaching it. So, so that experience that people crave or demand for certain jobs, I think that's increasingly a bit of a misnomer.
We have another question here from Carissa about the workplace. She said, I'm a massive advocate of the office too, but who do you think should be driving the really noisy conversation around how we do that properly so we get real human connection that you're talking about? So rather than something that's manufactured.
Yeah. It's another very complex and difficult situation, isn't it? We talked about the Revolut example. There was the Atlassian example of actually the idea of building it and they will come. We have seen in certain industries, like financial services in particular, and also Amazon, mandating a 5-day return to work, which saw people leave. The argument being, well, if you're not hardcore enough, then you're not right for this job. But I think when the pandemic hit, I was really worried that we'd start to see this 2-tier workforce. So people who could, in industries that could afford the flexibility, and that's either location flexibility or time flexibility, and those that couldn't, those frontline workers, those, nurses, medics, teachers, transport staff. Those people are so important for society to run. I was really worried that we'd see them. They're not necessarily very well remunerated either, but if they can't have that flexibility, would we see a real move away from those industries? And I know now that the NHS is really struggling, for example, with recruitment, particularly with nurses. So the return to work question, sorry, that was a bit of a digression there, but it's something that I think is still very important that hasn't been addressed, this idea of this two-tier system. The return to work, I read a lot about it. I listen to a lot about it. I feel very grateful that I am my own boss and I can be flexible. And I know, I'm able to, if I'm able to sort of set my own day and have that autonomy, I might go for a run. I might listen. I might do some learning. I might have a couple of meetings. My day is great. It goes back to what Rajan Chatterjee said about having that control, having that contentment, and having that alignment. If you're able to enable your workers to have those things by setting the example yourself, then they will be better motivated to come into the office or to work from home. I do worry about teams that are fully remote, but that's just because of who I am. Although I work on my own at home, in my office here, I do have to go out at least once or twice a week to press the flesh. And I think for teams, that's really important, especially for youngsters. And I know that someone was telling me that London is still a magnet for young people, but you're getting this weird situation where actually they're being priced out. They want to go to the office, even though there isn't necessarily a mandate, but actually the transport costs and the costs of sandwiches at lunchtime mean that it doesn't really work for them. So that's another element to consider and worry about.
Tension.
Absolutely. Well, Ollie, we're coming up to the end of time now. If anyone has any last questions, do feel free to pop them into the chat. I think Dan has a
Did you want to
mission
ask
here.
people what they would do if the 4-day week did happen, what people would do at that time?
Well, let's ask you two. If you two had 1 day a week, how, in theory, would you like to, and we're not talking about, doing the dishes or, doing sort of menial tasks. In an ideal world, what would you do? And brackets, what's stopping you?
I mean, I do have 1 day a week most of the time, and usually I'm not happy about it because I need to fill it with some work. But
yeah.
But yeah, I actually have had control over my schedule for so long now that I'm the same as you. So I fill the moments I have in work with hot yoga, which is absolutely essential to my mental health and well-being. And I also spend quite a lot of time on AI developing ideas. I take the dog for a walk and I literally have ChatGPT open to the voice mode and I'm having a conversation with it about, well, what if I did this? What if I did that? So for me, it's about pursuing interest, learning more. And yeah, I mean, Scott mentioned their charity give back. Maybe I should think about doing more of that. And I started a podcast. So that is, those are my things. What about you, Dan?
That is certainly, that certainly takes up a lot of time. How about you, Dan?
Oh, this is awful. My brain was like, probably catch up on the household tasks because the washing machine's never off here, to be honest, and the laundry doesn't stop. But that's really boring. I'd like to get some balance in there because I went out as consulting working for myself just over 12 months ago, and I haven't quite got the balance of finding that day to myself yet. But if I did have that entire day, I'd have a blend of things. I think of some exercise and stuff for because me and my mental health, and then figuring out a bit of extra time with young kids before the youngest starts to go to school. That would be the dream. And then I think the other bit is that we do the podcast, so that probably equates for some of the time we do that, and that for me is so much learning. I think we said this from the beginning. This just pours so much information into our brains, and I'm loving that side of it. So probably just having a bit of time to harness some of those learnings into applying that a bit more.
So a bit more reflection, maybe. I love that. And actually, something you said, Alice, jogged something in me as well. thinking about schools and thinking about how they prepare the kids for whatever happens. One of the schools that my son is going for, they actually start their Monday morning, first thing Monday, with a 45-minute reflection period, and that may be yoga, that may be meditation or whatever. So maybe they've got the right idea. Yeah.
And Alice and I have said that one of our aims for this year, because we want to do more live events, both in person and virtual, things like that, we did put on our little pretend mood borders that we were going to go hopefully into schools or universities and present about what work has been like for us in our career journeys and how we're now in this portfolio career stage, just so that present work is weird now and what that could mean to you if the path isn't, linear. So we would love to do that, but we're week 2 in the year, so we're still figuring that bit out.
And someday we'll have education is weird now as well. We just need to find an 8th day in the week, I think.
We want education is weird now as a spin-off.
Yeah.
So we've done this one spin-off episode with a second in the pipeline, but we definitely feel like there's so much more to talk about around education being weird now.
Totally. I love that.
But everything is weird now, and sounds like everything is going to be weird in 2026. So thanks so much, Ollie. I think there's a couple questions that came at the end, but we'll make sure that we get you to respond in the comments so that people can get answers to their questions. Really appreciate everyone joining us today in their lunch hour. Hopefully you learned something. And if you want to share the episode, it will be out tomorrow, so you can send it out to your friends. And Happy New Year, everybody. And good luck for the coming year.
We hope this conversation left you with hope rather than the doom and the gloom. But thank you for joining us, Ollie, on our first ever live.
My great pleasure very much, and good luck everyone for the year ahead.